because rarely am I at a loss for words. I could hardly talk, Max, during the first hour. I'm having trouble forming words right now. And the reason I'm making this statement is this fraud is so off-the-charts gargantuan that I can't even wrap my mind around how bold these people are, and it scares me at a fundamental level to know that they could set off nukes and blame it on people to launch new wars. They could release bioweapons. They could stage terror attacks and blame it on patriot groups, which they're clearly conditioning the public for. That they're not going away. They're not going to stop. This is a hot revolution by the private banking cartels that only have the, quote, open stock market as a way to swindle people and to feed their operation. They're imploding Europe now. And now all the experts I talk to aren't saying a year or two till we go into full total collapse, but maybe even sooner. So let's now, we've talked about what's going on over here, and then simultaneously, with no debate, no news coverage really, they just say, it's not 150 billion, it's $1 trillion. Now they're saying it may be $2 trillion. They're saying, just like here in our Congress, they won't tell these governments where the money's going. It's just we wake up, private central banks through the G20 run everything, and they say, we're taking your pension funds, we're taking everything, and the SWAT teams are standing by if you don't like it, and you've got a bunch of Bernie Madoff, Ken Lay types that are hundreds of times worse. Just literally, I mean, they own the intelligence agencies. They run everything. Let me simplify because I'm just ranting here. I mean, I'm trying to even get my mind around this. What's happening in Europe? How does it tie into this? And what's their game plan? What do you see happening, Max Keiser?
Okay, well, in Europe, they have just gone through the credit collapse that America experienced in 2008 and have finally caught up to the European banking system. And similarly to what we saw in the United States, the banking system got overextended in the sold derivatives market, which is just a fancy way to say debt. And the European banks got way in over their head with hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars worth of debt. Now, here's the funny bit. All of this derivatives, all this debt in Europe is priced or manufactured in dollars. So in order to extricate the banks, in order for them to unwind themselves, to get out of the corner that they painted themselves into, the United States just sent Europe $1 trillion in exchange for some euros. Because that's the only way they can unwind their problems, because they're all priced in dollars. So they needed $1 trillion just so they could unwrap themselves from all this bad debt that they put themselves in. And in doing so, America just gave them $1 trillion. No congressional review, no conversation, no debate. They just signed a check for $1 trillion in exchange for some euros, which of course is just another fiat currency, which is manufactured by another European central bank, another central bank, which just loans money into existence out of thin air with no, as the German chancellor said, we just lend money with no collateral whatsoever. So they just did basically a swap of $1 trillion in worthless dollars for $1 trillion or less in euros, just so that the banks could, on paper, say that they were unwinding from all these trillions of dollars of debt.
Now, was this part of a...
So they could pay themselves their salaries and bonuses, and it's purely for their own self-aggrandizement. The fact that they've destroyed the euro in the process, and they've destroyed the dollar in the process, never occurs to anyone as being a problem. But, of course, the folks over there in the gold market sniff big problems, and gold keeps hitting new highs against the euro, against the pound, every single major currency in the world except the dollar, which it'll hit a new high again shortly. But the gold vigilantes are saying, oh, wait a minute, buddy, you know, you just can't print trillions of dollars out of thin air to help your banker buddies without at some point totally debasing that currency, and this is what's driving gold.
But, Max, specifically, this is by design. I mean, I remember reading Trilateral Commission documents from the 70s, how they plan to create 3 global currencies, a euro, a dollarized North American Union, a Asian unified currency, then currency wars between those, and then the answer to the crisis they had created will be this global cashless society where they phase out the currencies and just move to the SDRs, and now it's just digital on your card, and the bankers literally are then the fraudulent emperors and kings and lords of our planet. So
well,
again...
I think they're moving right to the SDR phase. In other words, the middle phase, you talked about the three primary world currencies and there being a lot of conflict there. I think we're already through that. We're moving right to the SDR now, because the SDR was a big part of this European bailout package. The SDRs in circulation increased by 20-fold, I believe, in the last 3 days. Some incredibly high number. So that's now being floated exponentially. So the SDR is now quickly going to be usurping the U.S. dollar in terms of its total influence in global...
Clearly. So what's going to happen politically as Germany and France and England and Portugal and Spain and Greece...
Okay.
Hold on. Are all...
Very simple. You're going to see a global tax, a world tax. You're going to have to pay a tax to the U.S., and the global central bank, and your local municipality, and your state. So you're going to pay local, state, federal, and world tax.
And they've all announced this. That was going to be their carbon tax and this global VAT, they're calling the fat tax. But I go back to the rest of my question. If it's so politically unpopular to take people's pension funds and to put taxes on their cars and their food and everything else, to give it to criminal bankers who made all this debt up out of nothing, and Merkel almost lost control of her parliament. Sarkozy, a few months ago, dumped the carbon tax because he almost lost control in the French government. All these, everywhere. Gordon Brown just had to step down. This is political suicide. So what are the bankers going to do to get this through?
They're going to use more financial terrorism, like we saw on Thursday.
And so they keep saying, give us whatever we want, or there'll be a depression, as they walk us in to a austerity depression that's meant to be a financial poverty straitjacket.
Alex, last Thursday, the stock in Accenture went from $48 to a penny in 15 minutes. $48 to a penny. Everyone who owned Accenture stock, all the employees, all the pension funds that own that, got wiped out in 15 minutes, from $48 a share to a penny in 15 minutes.
So they can just do whatever they want. Why are the bankers 1,000 times more criminal than they've ever been? I mean, I've never...
This moral hazard has become the de facto business model of America and the world. There's no safeguard. There's no pushback. There's no regulation. There's nobody stopping them. It's a cancer. It's out of control. There's nothing stopping it.
Ron Paul and others are saying the euro will now die within the next year. Do you agree with that?
All fiat currencies are going to die. The only question is in what order.
What will be the last standing, the dollar?
Well, I could give you my speculation about that, but it's pointless. You just have to break through even trying to figure out how many angels are going to end up on the head of that worthless pin, and just buy gold.
Well, I just can't believe it's come to this. I mean, these guys have really got a lot of chutzpah, don't they?
Well, it's economics is a social science. It's not a natural science. People like to think it's like physics, it's like chemistry. It's not. It's psychological. And we know from psychological experiments, when you give people the option to terrorize other people, they become terrorists. And you see this time and time again with experimentations where you give people a petty authority to run a jail. This was done on campuses several times, the famous experiments. And within a very short period of time, the worst elements of people rise to the surface. We saw it in the Abu Ghraib prison. You give some prison guards a little authority, and within a few weeks, they become these psychotic, torturing, sadomasochistic, sexual deviants. And this is the nature of what we find if you don't have some kind of civilizing forces in place.
And that's what our founding...
You give bankers on Wall Street who are suicide bankers, who already have a God complex, like Lloyd Blankfein saying he thinks he's God. You give him unlimited credit with no interest costs whatsoever, and you tell them that everything he does is perfect. And you end up, that's a recipe for creating financial terrorism.
Megalomania.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Megalomania. Clearly, though, because it's a global system, they can loot one country or one region at a time while they're off in their armored fortresses. You can tell who the real government is. When a president or somebody comes to town, there's a small detachment of security, comparatively a few hundred. When the G20 comes, it's the army. It's 25,000 police. It's no free speech in the city. It's police dogs attacking old women coming out of grocery stores. It's we're God. We're going to... What did you think of the IMF head in the Washington Post saying the good times are over and laughing at people and saying we're going to screw you? I mean, they are just such arrogant creatures, and they really think they're going to get away with it because they don't care if Greece burns. They don't care if Germany burns. They don't even care if the U.S. burns. They will use that as a way to consolidate things. We have that in the IMF documents, how they create the IMF riots. So how do you beat them? How do you beat a group of criminals that have millions and millions of paramilitary police working for them that can't even balance their checkbook and bow down to anybody with a bald head in a suit?
Well, I know how you can beat them, but and I'm interested to hear you try to convince me that my way to beat them is unworkable, because I think it is workable.
Okay, we try to shoot down Coca-Cola legally by going after its stock.